This is Report to Wyoming.
Desirée Tinoco drops in to talk about a nonprofit that works to find missing people in Wyoming. Before starting the nonprofit, she was a stay-at-home mom. Just before the Gabby Petito case, she decided she wanted to start something that would provide more information and updates on missing persons statewide. We talk about Wyoming's vast landscape with large, desolate territories and the unique characteristics of the state that play a role in finding missing persons. We also discuss the prevalence of Native Americans going missing, along with the elderly and people with mental illness or a history of drug abuse and the challenges that come with locating them. Tinoco explains how Missing People of Wyoming works with the DCI to put out information that might help the missing persons to be found.
So, Desirée Tinoco, I'm founder, CEO of the nonprofit Missing People of Wyoming. It started out as a Facebook group and kind of exploded from there. And sadly, because of the Gabby Petito case, it got our state so much more attention for missing persons. And, if it wasn't for that case, I don't think we would have as following or as much of an impact as we do. And just working with the state and getting all this stuff going. There's so many different people involved. It's great to see it all kind of come together.
Okay, and when did the Facebook page start?
That would have been about 2019. So we're coming up on 4 years now.
And there is it's not a Facebook page, but there's an official Missing People of Wyoming page, right? And your information largely corroborates what theirs is saying on their website.
On DCI's, yeah. So when we started the group, it was kind of hard to find cases that weren't getting attention. Obviously, that's the whole purpose of a group like that. There are several of these groups throughout the country. I like the idea of a group rather than a page because the public can work with you. It's much more up to the minute when somebody goes missing to be able to submit that and just, get it on the group. And it's just easier to work with the public in that way. So once we got that going, working with DCI for them to create their database, a public database, that's where I personally get a lot of those flyers that you'll see on the group. And they, they're wonderful to work with. There's so many cases that come in and out of the system, runaways especially. So you'll see cases that'll be on there for just a few days or a few weeks. And I think with a lot of people in the public, they expect there to not be so many cases. And so right away they're like, why are there so many people going missing? This is not normal. Sadly, it is. Kids go missing, adults go on trips. I mean, things happen. And so that, door is always rotating, unfortunately.
And then sometimes, maybe there are people that don't want to be found, or it's not always a terrible, tragic situation. But it's important. I think it's still important that you guys put the word out there. And then it makes me wonder, too, is there a certain amount of time before the likelihood of finding someone safely plummets dramatically?
After the first 48 hours, as we always hear, is very crucial, right? But, the longer you go, the odds go down so much more. And, going back to what you said before, when somebody doesn't want to be found, there's nothing illegal with that. And, I don't want unnecessary attention to be focused on someone. Having said that, however, we don't have all the information when someone goes missing, nor is it really our business, right? We're just there to share cases, factual information, try our best to not harass people for whatever reason that, their circumstances are, and not get in the way of law enforcement. So when those cases get listed on DCI's database and we go to share them on the group, we may not know anything about it. They may not want to be found, or, there's some cases on there that unfortunately they're still listed as missing. However, remains haven't been found. So just because they're on that database doesn't necessarily mean they're truly missing. They just, they can't be taken off there, unfortunately. But, it's like I said, that's none of our business getting into the details of that. We're just there to share all cases regardless with an equal, light on them.
Yeah, because I imagine with crossing state boundaries and also just, I guess if someone's been on there for such a long time, their photograph isn't going to be up to date. And there are so many older cases where they haven't been found yet. And it's heartbreaking because then you go, what happened to these people? Where are they? And you just want to know some kind of closure, even if it's worst case scenario. And so for those families, you always will see like anniversary posts or people trying to repost so that they know that the public still knows, hey, this person is still missing. But it's so sad because, again, it's hard to get updated pictures. The information about what they left home wearing, 20 years ago that doesn't matter at this point, unless, I guess it all could matter because you might find a sweater or something somewhere, but.
Yeah, once you're looking at cases, sadly, once you start looking at cases that are over a year old, unfortunately, the odds of, it's hard to say. I hate to offend family or, make it sound like a grim situation, but at that point, you're fortunate enough to find remains. A lot of those cases, they'll never find remains. And so for that, yeah, it's nice to know what kind of fabric could possibly be linked to a case. I know there's a case in Nebraska right now where an arm bone was found. They were adamant. People thought it was Chance Engelbert, but it's not because of the fabric that was found. They're still waiting on DNA on that case. And he's a gentleman that went missing he went missing in Nebraska, but from Wyoming. So, talking about state lines, borders, Wyoming is unique in the fact that we have reservation lands. I myself am Native. I've lived on 2 reservations. So that hits close to home for me. There was another report put out by the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Task Force, and I'm a member of that. It's anybody that has an interest in missing persons and natives and the odds of them going missing, you can reach out to Kara Chambers for information on joining the task force. We just had our first in-person meeting probably 2 weeks ago, and that was the first one since, unfortunately, COVID locked everything down. And especially on the reservation, they got hit really hard with COVID. So they were very strict on their protocols there. We had a wonderful turnout, a lot of great suggestions brought forth by the public. Unfortunately, there weren't that many people there that were in higher up positions. It would have been nice to see more people of power coming to those meetings. I think that's really important, especially on the reservation. They suffer more missing persons than anyone else. It's a unique situation there in Riverton and the surrounding area. But the majority of those Native Americans are going missing off the reservation. So we think of it as a them problem, not an us problem. Emily Grant, she's the one that put this whole thing together. I believe her first report was 2 years ago. And that made world news. That was right when the Gabby Petito stuff happened, right after DC had created their database, and right when the group was really finding its ground. So that all kind of happened at the same time. Her report showed some, horrific information and stats on how Indigenous people are going missing more often, more likely to be murdered. It's all around just not good for them. And then going to this meeting and hearing them say that there's conflict between members of these 2 tribes on this reservation and people are fighting over who's in charge of MMIP is just so sad to see because, I've been fortunate enough here where I am in Casper. We've got a great team of people and there's plenty of work to be done and everybody kind of plays their role. We have private investigators with nonprofits. Kara Chambers is the head of the victims advocacy for the state. It's just wonderful to see all these people work together. A friend, Jen, is a reporter, and she does a lot of stories on missing persons. We all kind of found our spot. And most recently, we had the podcast as well with Renee. And so, having all those avenues, it just works so well. And going to the reservation and seeing how they're really struggling there is so unfortunate. Especially I think I can just, like I said, I can relate to it a lot just being Native and having lived on reservations. I haven't lived in Riverton, but living on other reservations, it's very unfortunate to see how that's all played out.
Are there any other demographics that you see that maybe there's more prevalence for going missing?
Yeah. So, and that's something that there's this, racial kind of tension that happens, right? And so the way that I kind of talk to the majority of the public talking about missing Indigenous people is hey, just so you know, this isn't just a them problem. It's also elderly people with dementia, a man that happens to go off hunting, the frantic idea of this burden that we have to find this person kind of fizzles out really fast with those cases. And of course, there's people that have questionable backgrounds. The whole reason I started the group was there were 2 gentlemen that went missing, separate cases, and they, didn't live the most perfect lives. And because of that, the public law enforcement, press, everyone just didn't think of them as real people. And it's unfortunate to see that kind of play out, and nobody was talking about these cases. One of them, the remains were found, maybe that next spring. And then the other gentleman is still missing, and you never hear anything about these cases. It's kind of unfortunate to see that kind of play out in that way. So yeah, it's not just an indigenous problem, but they are it's probably the worst for them. And understanding, the Gabby Petitos, it's not every beautiful white blonde woman that gets that attention, but she's statistically way more likely to get that attention than, somebody with a drinking problem or somebody that went out hunting or whatever, whatever the case may be.
Now, Wyoming is such a unique state. We're so widespread. It's vast. Lots of rural community. Do you think that plays a role kind of in, I guess, finding someone and how that affects, like when we find these remains, it's weird. Sometimes it'll be years before the remains are found and they're in these like kind of ranch towns or whatever. And I just wonder if that's, you think, kind of unique about where we're at.
Yeah. Wyoming is ranked 7th in the nation per capita for missing persons. And it's not just reservation lands or, indigenous people. It's also that it's just so desolate of an area. We have man camps and lots of land and, parks, and people come from not just, I feel like in Wyoming, we kind of make fun of everyone that, shows up to Yellowstone and does something stupid. But it's not just them doing something stupid that you would think of, right? We forget we're in our own little world inside city limits. And you could live here your whole life and not understand what kind of danger you're putting yourself in, and others when they go, searching for you, right? So understanding, like, you see some cool video on TikTok or YouTube or whatever it may be, and you're like, oh, I want to go see that. I want to go check that out. Well, are you prepared? Even if you are prepared, you can't, it's not 100% guarantee. And it's like finding a needle in a haystack. I mean, it really is it's just miles and miles and acres, and people forget how desolate it can really be when you don't have cell service or your car acts up.
Oh, that's crazy. And then the weather that we have too. If you go missing at the wrong time of year, it's a death sentence.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. Yeah. And then you kind of said that that's how you started, or you described how you started the Facebook group. What was that like? Your initial steps?
So, and I've been asked this before, I was really hesitant to start the group initially. I've never started a group. I've never wanted to be known for anything, and I never thought I could be successful at something. I'm the type of person to just rather not try at all, to say that I didn't fail, so I don't look like an idiot, I suppose. And, those two cases, it really, it pissed me off. It was very upsetting to see them. They weren't getting any attention. And so I thought, well, if I just started at that time, I probably had maybe, I don't know, it was like 300 or maybe 400 friends on Facebook. And I was like, well, if just some of them, like if just my friends join it, I would consider that a success. And then I remember once we hit the 10,000 mark, and I went down to Red Rocks for a concert with some friends and my daughter, and looking around and knowing what that stadium could hold, or that venue, could hold, and thinking that there was that many people, visually seeing that many people, and like, wow, this is what a difference I'm making. Like, this many people cares about that. And, now we're at over 25,000 members, and I just can't even imagine, especially in such a low populated state like Wyoming. So I knew something was off when the group got so big so fast. And my sister, she has a missing persons group from Missouri. So this was back in my head, in the back of my head for quite some time. And I was thinking, why, Kansas City is such a large city. Missouri is so populated. And to see this group that I just started have more members than hers, I knew something was off. And it was more than joking about, competing with its sibling and that kind of thing and doing better on my group than hers. I was desperate for answers. So then I started to look online, and Google was just referring me to myself. And I was like, we've got a big problem here. This isn't how it should be. And then, different states run differently. And it was figuring out who was in charge of it, who to go to and ask for help. reaching out to state representatives wasn't really getting me anywhere. And so I finally went to a Casper City Council meeting because they had it on their agenda that they were going to do some stuff with sex trafficking. So I called up the mayor, actually, surprisingly, he answered. And it's not our current mayor, but the one we had previous, and I'm so bad with names. But I called him up, and he answers right away. And I was like, hey, I saw this was on your agenda. This is what I've been trying to do. We need something provided by this state. Like, we're not doing what other states are doing, especially concerningly other states around us that we can relate to, right? So, what Florida or New York does obviously isn't going to work for us. But if South Dakota is doing it, even Washington or Montana, these other states are doing something, we should be following what they're doing. And they were really receptive. So that's when the police chief got me in touch with Frosty over at DCI. He was their director, and he's since retired. But he's a great, great guy. So I've been invited down to DCI headquarters. I gave a presentation down there, and they started to work on getting, basically just using me as this vetting process of questions, concerns from the public and families of those that were missing, and trying to figure out what would work best for our state, and getting that public database up has been a crucial piece in that.
I wonder how many times have you seen people commenting things that are really useful and that do make a big difference, since you started? Yeah.
So we try to, we don't know anything about the cases, so I'd hate to say don't comment on a post, but definitely take it to law enforcement. Sometimes people will comment on there and you just don't know if that information shouldn't be released to the public or not. That group is, it's open, and, it's such a beast at this point. Like, anytime anything gets posted or commented, it's like opening a can of worms. You never know what to expect. Mm-hmm. But it's good. I don't want to say not to. If you think there's something worth commenting, or even, message me and ask me what to do. DCI has a wonderful thing on their website. If you don't feel comfortable talking to law enforcement, some people don't, or it can be intimidating, they have an option to submit tips anonymously on their website. So I'm always plugging for that. So if you go to DCI, if you just search Missing Persons Wyoming, the very first thing that pops up is DCI's database. And on there, you'll have an option to submit tips. You can call them with information regarding anything, even if it's wrong. At least I'd rather you do it and not regret, because they're not going to shut you down. And there's some wonderful people that work over there and genuinely just want to help families.
Was this the first time that missing people were shared in Wyoming on Facebook, like a social media platform?
Yeah, trying to find there were cases were shared on buy and sell groups, but there wasn't just one place for everything to go. There hasn't been anything like that. And of course, technology works fast and government works slow. And Wyoming is a very conservative state. And, there's pros and cons that come with that. And we can see what's worked for other states and learn from the choices they've made and make the best choice for Wyoming. And so I think that was a really great way to look at what you could say is a negative situation. I think is, it was well timed for us to have something in place. So once they got that, we really got all cases in Wyoming, listed on the group. And that was almost like a weight lifted off my shoulders. It's a kind of like an OCD thing. We got to have everything organized. I have to have all my ducks in a row. And here we finally have all of them together.
And then you said you do the podcast. Is this weekly?
Yeah, so I work with Renee Nelson, and she is down in Cheyenne. She has a wonderful podcast, Unsolved Wyoming Cases, Cold Cases, and Haunted Places. And she came to me, I want to say about a year ago, and asked if I could help her out with this. And I had no connections to her before. I had no idea who she was, and I just jumped at the idea of it because we'd been talking about wanting somebody to do podcasts. We'd been talking about wanting somebody to do podcasts for quite some time. And, it's a lot of work to do a podcast, I'm sure you know. And several people had suggested I do that. And I just thought the group is so much, and I have no experience in this. So it was wonderful to have her come forward and help out and just another avenue for people to learn about cases.
And it keeps things relevant, I'm guessing, because you can look at cases that have been cold for a long time, but that person still might be out there. They might be able to be found.
Yeah, absolutely. And, new tips come in. I know there's a few cases that either herself or there's like Amanda Waldron. She's a private investigator with We Help the Missing. And Jen Kocher, she's a reporter. So there's all these different avenues where people either bring information or people start digging up information. And I don't want to speak too much on cases, and I don't really know much about particular cases, but I do know with what those ladies have been doing, there's some old cases that they've been working on pretty hard. So that's wonderful to see.
And then how has the podcasting been going? Well, first of all, one more time, what was it called again?
Unsolved Wyoming Cold Cases and Haunted Places. And so, if you have any suggestions for her on cases, anybody is more than welcome to reach out to her and give her some information. We always like to work only with families of those that are missing. We don't want to bring up cases that family doesn't want. We don't want to come across disrespectful or in poor taste when it comes to missing persons cases.
And then you said before this you were a housewife?
Yeah, I've been a stay-at-home mom for years. I've always worked odd jobs, but because of my husband's work, it's kind of hard to keep up with everything. So, yeah, it just kind of came out of nowhere and had no experience in any of this before.
This is amazing that it just took you by storm. And now, is it a full-time job?
Yeah, I don't think I could work like a typical job that it just takes too. I'm constantly have to have my phone glued to me. Even now, I'm checking it. Making sure just to know, just to be in a reassurance for family members. Like if I go a half day without checking it, somebody might be mad, and it could really, not be good for cases. There could be crucial information coming in. A lot of people tend to turn to that group rather than law enforcement, and I don't want to shut them away. However, we got to make sure everything's on the up and up. We have to make sure there's a process, and we have to respect that process.
Yeah, and then what's nice, I think, about your guys' group is that you update. So when someone's found, we know, okay,
right.
They've been located.
And one thing about that is a lot of people will question why I take out all personal information from the posts that I take from DCI's website. I don't get permission from the families. I don't know the information about the cases. So I don't want to leave that information out there. So all of that gets taken out once those people get found. Now, a family member that posts on the group, they can do whatever they want with it. But just for safety, I like to make sure, especially when you're not getting permission from the families.
Now, you might not be able to speak to this as much, not knowing too much about the cases, but do you think that trafficking here is a big problem?
Absolutely. Trafficking is a huge problem everywhere. And it's not like how Hollywood would make it out to be. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's family, and you don't expect that. Kidnappings, you think it's just some stranger off the street, and it's not. It's almost always somebody they know. It's a lot of times in Wyoming for trafficking, that's the same way that works. And it's hard to get a real number for trafficking, right? It's like counting cockroaches. You'll never figure it out. But we do have issues with it. Any place where there's large gatherings of people, you will always find trafficking, unfortunately. A couple years ago, Cheyenne Frontier Days, they had a huge bust down there for trafficking. So it happens, unfortunately, everywhere. And I don't know what the answer is for that. That's such like a grim situation. In fact, my cousin right now is missing from Missouri, and she's been trafficked before. And she's missing again. So unfortunately, we don't know. She could be trafficked right now. We just have no idea anything about her circumstances at this time.
We've talked to the director of Uprising. I don't know if you've had the chance to talk to them yet. So they're kind of the first, I want to say, nonprofit that deals with trafficking in Wyoming. But she did say that you have a higher chance of recidivism if you've been trafficked before. So
yeah,
so sorry.
They're a wonderful nonprofit. I have spoke with them. They do some great work. I believe I got in touch with them through the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Task Force. I believe that they had a few meetings with us there, but they've done some great work. Yeah,
and she kind of said the same thing you said. And then I wondered too about just like domestic issues and custody battles, and sometimes we'll see some of that, and that's really frustrating because the person's, they're missing, but they've been taken by a parent or,
Right, and those are the only cases that we allow on the group that aren't verified with law enforcement. All the other Wyoming cases I verify within 24 hours of the person being missing, and, it's frustrating to see how those play out. However, the good thing is with Wyoming being so small population-wise, it's great because the truth will come out eventually, somehow, some way. And so when a parent has taken off with a child and there aren't rights or anything put in place, it'll eventually work its way out. It's just unfortunate. Those cases are very unfortunate. I can't imagine how frustrating that must be for the parents. And we just had one recently. 2 daughters were missing, and they ended up finding them out of state, and they were gone for a couple months with their mom, and questioning on mental health, was a thing. And they're back home with dad, which is great. Gosh, and that post got thousands of shares or views. I mean, it just exploded.
There's something to that. It's like the face on the milk carton, but so much bigger, just having people be able to see a picture. It's simple, but it really helps, I think, for people to just be aware, look for people. And
that's how I explain the group, especially starting out, is it's a digital milk carton. That's the best way to explain it. Yeah,
people don't know what we're talking about. Babies. I don't know. Do they do that still? I don't
know.
So.
And they should. I think they should. I think that's great that wherever you can put any information for the public, you definitely should do that.
I want to say, maybe that was just a really 90s thing, following like some of the high profile cases that got a lot of attention, like you're saying. Is it Elizabeth Smart? I think that's her name, from Utah.
Yeah.
That was the one that was on my milk carton back in the late 90s. But yeah, I don't mean to interrupt, but she just did a thing down in Cheyenne. I was supposed to go to it and I wasn't able to. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And it's crazy that she's doing like public events because, with what she's been through, and security is heightened. And the woman that kidnapped her is actually out of prison now.
Oh my gosh. But she's got to be, I'm guessing 30s, but she was kidnapped in Utah, I think Salt Lake.
Very wholesome family and, good upbringing, and taken from her bedroom in the middle of the night. And I don't know, they had her like 9 months or something. I don't remember how long it was. But it was just such a crazy case. And she just did a seminar down in Cheyenne. Renee from the podcast was able to go, and she actually helped with sound during that. And yeah, I guess the security was really, really strict. She's like saying she couldn't even meet her, and she's working the show. And like, yeah, well, and the woman that, kidnapped her lives in Utah, so it's not far from there. And this is a very publicized event that, Elizabeth was coming to speak at this event. Mm-hmm. And,
the anxiety and fear that she still lives with. It sounds like it's just like that never would go away, that you could just be removed from your family and everyone you know so quickly. It's terrifying, and the work that you do is so important. It must be really heavy, though, too. How do you kind of deal with the nervousness, the stress, all of the emotions?
You just don't. I don't like to get into details of cases. It just hits too close to home. I still do like some like podcasts or documentaries, especially when they're not about Wyoming, because then I'm not involved in, it's not here. It's not right in front of me. Right. But it definitely makes me parent my kids a little differently. And kudos to my daughter, because she has been so great. She checks in all the time with me, and, I have her location on her phone. She shares that. And so she knows why. It's not that I don't want you to have your freedom. It's that I want to make sure you're okay. And she, she's such a great kid. But yeah, it definitely makes you parent your kids a little bit differently. You hear some stories and then it gets to you emotionally. But I don't think it's gotten that bad, I guess. It could be a lot worse. I've seen a lot more helicopter parents than myself. I think there's definitely, mentioning again the whole OCD thing, and I mean, anybody that knows me will tell you I definitely like spot on with the OCD stuff. It's not just like, oh, I like things clean and organized. There's a ritual to it. I have to keep things in a certain way. And if I don't, something bad's going to happen. That you cannot talk yourself out of something like that. Like, if I don't do this stupid little thing, it's going to be the end of existence. And I think that's like my tunnel vision as far as this goes, like keeping it organized. And if I go like 2 days without updating posts, I feel horrible. So, I got to get back in the groove and, keep back up on it again. And it's a vicious cycle, but I hate to say it, I thoroughly enjoy it. There's something about that, keeping it organized, that I really, truly enjoy, and just not reading the details.
It's just mind-blowing, too, that it's such a new thing that we hadn't, had this for much longer. And so I'm appreciative of the work you're doing. We definitely like being able to go and see the information that you're putting out there so that we can button our posts up, too, and make sure that we're sharing accurately and try to make sure we update as soon as we see something from you or the DCI. We instantly thought, like, oh, is this legit? But then I had to check. Yeah, and I was like, no, everything checks out. And so then I realized that there's something more here. This is really big.
Yeah, I appreciate the attention on it. It's always great, and it's easy for people to thank me, but it's really the community that's done it. It's just that beautiful ripple effect that I just happen to be in the right place at the right time and do the right thing. Notice the right little hiccup there in the system. And so, getting other people on board and just suggesting is all I've really done is just suggested and deleting spam accounts. That's it. So
the spam accounts Facebook comes with a lot of crap. Yeah. And that's some of it. Yeah, for sure. Or tipsters that are looking for, I don't know if that happens to you, but
I haven't really experienced much of that. And the good thing about that is I just always direct them right to law enforcement, and somebody that's trying to, give some BS information isn't as willing to go to law enforcement. And I can understand why a lot of people don't want to talk to cops, but also understand they're just people and they're just trying to do their job. And the majority of them are good people. There's always jerks in the world. And just because you deal with one jerk doesn't mean they're all jerks. And, I've been thankful enough. The law enforcement I've worked with has always been very nice, very supportive. I haven't had much issue with dealing with them or government, which, I think a lot of people in Wyoming would be surprised by that. We're for small government, right? But it's worked out. And I think the public has done a great job in all of this.
This has been Report to Wyoming, presented in the public interest by Town Square Media.